This video is brought to you by Vogan Gold. Get your latest batch of Vogan Gold now in association with Gallifrey. Get all the gold you can get in the fight against the Cybermen. Alright everyone, how's it all going? Welcome back for a brand new tier list video. In the last tier list that we did a few weeks ago now, I did a ranking on all of the Dalek designs, and I spent over an hour on that video because there were a ton of Dalek designs. So today I thought it'd be fitting that I take a look at all of the glorious Cybermen designs that are featured in Doctor Who throughout the ages, beginning in 1966 all the way to their last appearance in 2020. So without further ado, let's start off this list. Hopefully I'm not going to be rambling on as much this time. Hopefully it won't be about an hour long like it was with the Dalek ranking, because there's a bit less to go through, but there's still quite a bit to talk about nonetheless. So we have the Mondasian Cyberman as seen in the first appearance in the 10th planet. I'm going to right off the bat put this in A. The reason I'm putting this in A and not S is because I do really like this design. I think it is incredible. It is the creepiest design that we've ever had for a Cyberman. Things like the cloth face make it look a bit more human, and overall just the whole look of it, the costume, the chest unit, and I suppose even the lights, like that light thing in between the handlebars. Yeah, that looks really cool. And what I really love about this is when they talk, you get to see their actual human mouths inside move, and it's like their mouth opens, but there's no like talking motion. If you get where I'm coming from. If you've seen the 10th planet, then you'll know completely what I'm on about. Also, the sing-song voices, really creepy, and that is one of the things that I absolutely adore about this particular type of Cybermen. We're only putting it in A though because I think there are better designs that have been done since then, and also it gets a lot of flack for aging badly, and I'll be the first one to admit that this one has aged a bit badly, and it's been ridiculed for things like the cloth face. I wouldn't necessarily call the cloth face a bad thing. I think it's more just other things like around the whole costume as a whole. They look a little bit cheap and tacky, but nevertheless I still really love this design. It's going in A. It's amazing. Next up we've got the Moonbase slash the Tomb of the Cybermen design. I'm going to put this in A because this improved upon the original design. You had an improved chest piece, and you also have more agile costumes, I feel. They act a little bit more like jumpsuits, which I suppose makes sense, seeing as the moon base is set on the moon. And the helmets look far better than the original design. The more metallic, the more of a familiar look for the Cybermen, like when you look at all of the designs overall. Overall, I just think it's a very iconic design, and I think this design often gets associated with the Tomb of the Cybermen. It's easy to say why, because scenes like when they're coming out of the tombs is so iconic. It's some of the best things that you'll ever see in Doctor Who history. So yeah, I'm putting this in A. It just goes just above the original Mondasian Cyberman. Oh, and also the voices of these guys are really creepy as well. The Cyber Controller from the Tomb of the Cybermen. Now the thing is, I do really like this cyber controller. Again, he's very iconic for different reasons, like when he emerges from his tomb, etc. I think that the whole brain thing, it looks a little bit silly, and forgive me for saying this, it looks rather suggestible, and I think looking back at it now, it looks silly, shall we say. It's not terrible, it's not the worst Cyberman design, it's certainly not the worst cyber controller design, put it that way. Don't worry, we'll get to that one. This guy, I'm going to put just right in the middle. I'm going to put him in B, because I don't think he's terrible, but I just think the helmet looks a little bit silly. Oh, and the one thing I do love about this, though, is the letterbox mouth that he has. That's really awesome. The next design, which was the Wheel in Space design, we only got this one once. We're going to be putting this in C. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mind the design. I think it works, but it often gets overlooked. We never got a character options figure for this, and I think the reason for it is because it often gets confused with the Moonbase tomb design, which I've just talked about. They look very, very similar, but there are a few differences with these ones. The helmets look slightly different, for instance, and these were the first ones to ever have the teardrop just underneath the eyes. When you look at the suits, they look really tacky. There's like wires all over the place, like tubes and piping. Like, what's all that about? They looked far better before. I just don't know, like, why this happened, really. It seems like they regressed a little bit. I feel like I'm really hating this design, because I don't hate it. I think if they were utilised better, and if they were a little bit tidier, then this would easily be at least one rank higher. Also, I've got to take into account that they are on the Wheel in Space, which isn't highly regarded by Doctor Who fans. So, yeah, it's unfortunately going to go in C rank, and these guys don't really do much for me. Also, the voices, I don't really like the voices. I much prefer the voices of the ones that came before this, and also the ones that came after this, which is what we'll be talking about now. It's the Invasion design. This has grown on me so much through the years. I've always loved the design. Upon seeing the pictures, this for me is when the designs really took off for me. I really loved the tomb design and the 10th Planet design, don't get me wrong, but this design, I think they nailed it with this one. Just the whole imagery of it, it just screams out Cyberman. The earmuffs, it's the first one with the earmuffs. The voices are spot on. It's just, it's so good. So for that, it's going in S. Really good design. And I'm surprised, really, that we haven't really seen these Cybermen pop up again in more stories. They could even get away with showing these in the modern era. I think the only tiny little thing that lets this down is the actual suits they wear are diving suits. But that's not really a bad thing. It kind of works well in a funny sort of way. The chest units here are also pretty dope. Next one is the Revenge of the Cybermen design. That infamous Cyberman story, which I used to like much more when I was younger, but on repeat viewings I've liked less and less.
I suppose like when you have a story straight after the Genesis was a Dalek, so you're always sort of doomed. But this story could have been so much better, but it wasn't. And these Cybermen are a little bit lame. I've always kind of liked the design of these Cybermen, but again, they suffer sort of a similar problem as what the Wheel in Space design suffered. And it's the fact that these guys could often be associated as being too similar to the Invasion design. Of course, they're not, because there's a few differences, such as the chest units, they're slightly different. Um, the helmets are very similar, but the handlebars have tubing now as opposed to just being more metallic, if you get where I'm coming from. They look a little bit like what the Henry Hoovers have, that sort of things going on with them. Um, I think that the costumes as well, they look a little bit cheap, like when you see them walking about and stuff. I do like the piping around uh, the suits though, that I do quite like. So for me, I'm just going to put this in B, um, because I still do like this design nonetheless. I think the voices of these guys are a bit lame as well. They were much better in the 1960s. Um, I don't know like why the voices were bad in this one. To be honest, it's sort of a similar scenario to how the Dalek sounded in the Day of the Daleks. So yeah, that's going in B. It just goes underneath the cyber controller. And while we're at it, let's put the cyber leader just in B as well. I'm going to put him in um, just in between the controller and the regular Cybermen from Revenge, because the leader, at least he does have a few iconic lines, and he infamously puts his hands on his hips quite a few times. But yeah, overall, the overall design of the Revenge of the Cybermen, it goes in B. The thing I do like about this leader is most of the helmet is black instead of just the handlebars, which is what you typically get with your cyber leaders. So that's kind of cool. Next up, we have the Earthshock design. I say Earthshock design, it's more or less the 1980s design, because this featured again throughout the rest of the 1980s Cybermen stories, albeit with a few alterations here and there. I'm just going to go ahead and put it in S. I'm just going to put it right at the top because I've always loved the design. It's so good. It was sort of the next step in the evolution of the design, because the 1970s ones, uh, the Revenge ones, uh, they look too similar to the Invasion, whereas these ones, it's like a huge step up. I love things like the design of the helmet and just the overall suit. I love how the shoulder section connects to the chest piece. I love how these guys are now carrying guns, and it kind of works better than just having a silly little gun at top of the helmet. I mean, I say it's silly. In parts in Revenge it was great, but in other parts not so great. These guys just look so cool, um, and the voices. My God, do I even need to explain to you how good the voices are of these guys? Yeah, you could say that they're ripping off Darth Vader, but you know what? These guys are good, and you still have a little bit of the human factor, especially in Earthshock, because you can see part of the mouth moving just underneath the um, helmet, and I quite like that touch. I remember when I was younger, I thought that was pretty lame, but actually, when you look into it, no, it's good because these were once people. These were Mondasians. So yeah, it goes in S. Simple as. And while we're at it, we're also going to be putting the Cyber Leader, uh, mainly the Cyber Leader that featured in Earthshock. He's going at S as well because he's the best Cyber Leader, hands down. David Banks is just a legend. The design is pretty much the same, except he has black handlebars, but as a individual cyber leader, he is so cool. The best cyber leader we've ever had in Doctor Who. We've never had anyone come close to this guy ever since. Next up, we have the Cyber Scout, or the Stealth Cyberman, whatever you want to call him, which is just basically a 1980s Cyberman, but all in black. It works well to some degree, but it doesn't really do all that much. It's just sort of there in the background. So for that, I'm just going to put him in C, just below the Wheel in Space Cybermen, because they don't really add all that much to the Cybermen lore. Whether we ever get anything like this ever again, maybe not. I'd like to, though, because I do like the whole idea. One thing I've always thought was stupid about this, though, is they're carrying gold guns, but I thought that the whole weakness was gold. So that was stupid. Staying with Attack of the Cybermen, we have the Cyber Controller, which featured in that story. Goes in C. It's the worst Cyber Controller, without any doubt. They got Michael Kilgareth back playing the Cyber Controller. He is, of course, the same actor who played the Cyber Controller, which featured in the Tomb of the Cybermen many years earlier. It just doesn't work. It looks out of shape. It looks like a sort of portly Cyberman. And yeah, I don't like the helmet, and I really don't like the voice of this one either. Just no. It's a terrible one. It's like a combination of the Fat Controller from Thomas the Tank Engine with the Cybermen. It's supposed to be threatening, but it just looks laughable instead. And I don't understand how you can get that, because you have something so good as this design, but it gets completely ruined with the controller. So yeah, let's just put it there in C and get it out of the way. Next up, we have the Cybermen. So we're in a new series now. Yeah, this is going in S. I mean, I've always loved these guys. These were the ones that I grew up with. These were the first ones I properly saw when I was 11 years old. They're so good. Things like the voices, they're very reminiscent of the ones as seen in The Invasion. And yeah, I like the suits. They featured quite a lot in the new series. They actually featured in the most recent Cyberman story as well, except they don't have the C's on the chest nowadays. They had the C's on the chest because they're off a parallel world. So, yeah, these guys, you say what you want about these guys. I really like them. I like how their mouths light up when they talk as well. That's quite cool. Cyber Controller from the Age of Steel, I'm going to put in A because I do like this design as well. I like how you have the brain sticking out. I actually prefer this to the Tomb of the Cybermen version, which might be controversial to some people, but it's just my opinion. It's not that much better, though, just to make you feel better. I think that this design does get let down slightly because he doesn't really do much for me. What I really do like about the design is his eyes are lit up. As I said, that you've got the brain stuck out. Apart from that, the rest of the body is pretty much the same. You have the little cords just at the chest there, as he was attached to his throne, because of course this was John Lumick. after he was converted into a Cyberman. So, next up we have the Cyber Leader, which featured in Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. I'm going to put it in B because it's just mainly the same design as the Cybusmen. And yeah, I put the Cybus ones in S, and I've only put this in B. It's a whole difference with like how I put the Cyber Leader for Earthshock at S along with those same normal Cybermen from that same story, because this Cyber Leader doesn't do all that much. He's just a normal Cyberman with black handles. That's it. That's it. He's not all that special when it all comes down to it. And he did a pretty shit job because the Daleks kicked their ass. So he did a pretty shit job as a leader. So for that, yeah, he's only going in B. But he's not the worst. He looks better than like all the ones in C. Put it that way. Next up, we're actually going into spin-off territory for a moment. We're going into Torchwood with the Cyberwoman. I'm going to say this, right? I always thought that it was very sexist, this design. It looks very sexualized, because you see like a lot of this woman's body with this design. But I think that the idea is pretty cool because essentially what this is, it is Ionto's girlfriend half converted into Cyberman. I'll put her in B. I'll just put her just below the Cyber Leader from the Series 2 finale because she does do quite a few things, but my problem with it is it's too sexualized. Perhaps if the design was a little bit different, she'd be way higher. But she goes in B. It's not terrible. I don't hate it by any means. I just think it could have been better. Next up, we have the Cyber Leader from the Next Doctor. I always confuse this with Cyber Controllers because this one's showing the brain, and it's kind of stupid. I put this in B. I put this below the one from the Series 2 finale. I'm putting it just above the Cyberwoman because I do like the voice of this one, but apart from that, it doesn't do all that much for me. But it goes in B. Still better than the Cyber Controller from Attack of the Cybermen. Then we have the Cyber Shades. The Cyber Shades do serve a purpose in the Next Doctor. They're very different. They're not actually Cybermen as such, but they're sort of a breed of the species, if you will. The helmets of gold, and they have different looking handlebars. You know, it's different. Do I think it's good though? I think it's okay, but it doesn't stand a chance against a lot of them. So I'm going to put it in C. I'm putting him at the top of C because they did the job in the Next Doctor. They did kidnap the children, from what I remember. I think that's what they did. They served the Cybermen. They were sort of like underlings to them, if you will. They're sort of like pets. They're sort of like a different take on what the Cybermats could have been, but probably better than the Cybermats in terms of how they are design-wise. If you take them away from the story, though, it doesn't really change the overall outlook. It's sort of a similar case to how the stealth Cybermen were in Attack of the Cybermen. So, goes in C. I'm placing him at the top of C simply because I do like this design. If we got more of these guys and we got more development about like where they come from and stuff like that, then it could be way higher. Could be way higher. But for me, it goes just at the top of C. Doesn't do all that much apart from look cool in a couple of scenes, let's be honest. Likewise with Cyber King, looks very cool, does a lot of destroying in Victorian London, but apart from that, gets defeated pretty easily, to be honest with you. And it's sort of the same case. If we saw more of these guys, maybe we would have had this ranked higher. But this guy goes in C. It goes just below the Cyber Shades because I just prefer the Cyber Shades design. It's as simple as that. This is just a giant Cyberman. And I don't hate it, but I just don't love it either. It's just there. So yeah, Cyber King. Next we have the Nightmare of Silver design, which featured heavily in the Moffat era. These guys, I've got mixed opinions about. I've always thought that these guys look like War Machine from the Marvel comics. They look too robotic for me. And you could sort of argue the same case for the Cybusmen. But the thing with the Cybusmen was their humanity was explored. We got a little bit of that in Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel. So those guys get away with it. These ones just seem like robots. I just don't feel like these used to be humanoids. They're just robots. That's how I feel. They just look like robots. I don't like how they run really fast in Nightmare of Silver. I don't like how they rotate their heads. Things like that I don't like. And I suppose as well, I don't like the way they move as well. Because again, they move like they're robots. I don't hate the design, but I just think when you're thinking about like what the Cybermen are all about, this is actually all my least favourites from the entire show's history. So for that, I'm just going to put these guys in B. I'm just going to put them sort of lower half of B, as you can see right now. And they also don't do all that much. They always feel like second fiddle, especially in the stories which featured the 12th Doctor, because you had Missy turning up and you had the Master turning up later on in World Enough and Time. But still, it goes in B. I still think it's better than the Wheel in Space design. But as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely my least favourite cyber design from the new series thus far. Like, if you don't include the Cyber Leader or the Shades or the King. Now, moving on to the next design, which harkens back to the past, and it is the Mondasian Cyberman Mark II. This goes in S. Everything I loved about the 10th Planet version of this is made even better with this. This is essentially the updated design of that original version that we saw way back in 1966. This for me is the ultimate version of the Cybermen. Their appearance in World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls, they look gorgeous. They look so good. I don't care what anyone says. You can say that they look crap with the cloth faces and things. For me, they look great. Little things have been modified, like the handlebars at the top and the little light thing just in between the handlebars. The chest unit, as far as I know, looks very, very similar, if not exactly the same. These guys have gloves now as well. But apart from that, yeah, I just think that they took the original design and they just made it even better with this modern take. And the voices are still the same. They're just, they're so brilliant. Nicholas Briggs did such a great job voicing these guys in the Series 10 finale. So, yeah, these guys, S tier, right at the top as well. They're my favourite ones, these ones. Favourite design ever, in my eyes. It's really weird because you'd think that something like the Nightmare in Silver design would be better. And it should be better. But those guys I just don't like. I don't like the look. I think they look too robotic compared to these guys. Like, these guys, you can see the humanity in them. Whereas the Nightmare in Silver ones, no, they just look like robots. They could be anything. The only way we know the Cybermen is just with the look of them, with the helmets and the chests, that's it. Also, those guys, I forgot to mention, not really keen on the voices of those as well. But this Mondas one, just so good. Perfect for me. It's absolute perfection. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the lone Cyberman himself, Ashad. This guy I really loved. I thought he was a great character who was wasted in the end, let's just say. As soon as the Master came in, he was sort of just pushed to one side, which is a real shame. He got Boba Fetted, as I'd like to say, because he's a really cool character. He sounds very intimidating. The guy who played him did an amazing job. And the look of him is like half converted again. And it's sort of all over the place emotionally. Because they're supposed to be emotionless. But this guy, there's still a little hint of it. And I really love it. The design of this is sort of a mix between the Nightmare in Silver design and the original 10th Planet design, and I love it. It's just so good. It's really good. I'm putting him in A though, and I'm putting him at the bottom of A, and it's because, like I said, he gets hard done by, and that for me really pushes him down a notch. And also, in the end, his plan to save the Cybermen, it doesn't really go anywhere in the end. But I think that's mainly due to that last episode dealing with other things like the Timeless Child arc. So he goes an A though. He's one of my favourites. If this guy did return in the future, then I wouldn't be surprised if he did end up in S. That is, of course, if he is done justice by whoever writes for him. Finally, we're going to talk about the latest design, which is the Cyber Warriors, which featured in Ascension of the Cybermen and the Timeless Children. Overall, I don't mind this design. I remember when I initially saw it, I really loved it. I thought it reminded me a lot of the Earthshock design. But when you look at the whole bodies, they remind me of the Nightmare and Silver versions again. Little things like the chest piece lighting up blue. And I'm not sure what to make of the spikes on the bodies. It might take time for me to get used to it. If these guys do turn up again in future stories, which, if we're going to go with the trend of modern Who, they probably will turn up again, because the previous two major designs of Cybermen did feature in multiple stories before they got changed. This might be a similar case. This might, you know what? It could go either way. It could go up, or it could go down. It entirely depends on how they're written. I think that they sit very firmly just right in the middle of B, because they don't do an awful lot, although they do have their moments in the Series 12 finale. We get a little bit of that humanity being explored, so I'm not gonna go on and say, oh yeah, they look too much like robots, because that's something which I think failed with the Nightmare and Silver versions. And this design overall I do prefer, mainly due to the new helmet design, but it is very similar to the Nightmare and Silver design. I didn't realise how similar it was until I've looked at them side by side. But I think I do prefer this. I think it is mainly due to the new helmet, amongst other little things that have been done to the overall design. And that is it. That is the tier list. So going from S to C, we have my favourite design being the Mondasian Cyberman featured in the Series 10 finale. Such a perfect design. Bring them back again. I'd love to see more of these guys again in future stories. It would just be amazing. Unfortunately, in last place, we've got the Cyber Controller from Attack of the Cybermen, who just looks really ridiculous and doesn't do an awful lot. This list was made by Optical Spectre, and that is it. That is my tier list for Cybermen designs. If you have any suggestions for any more Doctor Who tier lists that I can do in the future, then please comment below. I'd love to hear all of your feedback, and I'd also love to hear what you make as your favourite Cybermen designs and what you think is the worst Cyberman design. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I've just looked at the amount of time I spent doing this. I spent over around 40 minutes, so not as long as the Dalek ranking, but still quite long nevertheless. Right, I'm going to go now. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for even more Doctor Who content on the channel by subscribing to me. Make sure you hit the bell, like this video, and don't forget to comment, and also feel free to share this video as well amongst all of the Whovian community. Take care guys, and I shall see you in the next one.